Up to this point, we've created and populated our database directly through phpMyAdmin. When creating web applications, the database is populated through user interactions with your website. For example, the database we created contained registrations for newsletters. The users registering for your newsletter would do so directly through your website. In this lesson, we're going to explore inputting data into our database using an HTML form. As shown in this example, the form has 3 fields: first name, last name, and email. We don't have to input the ID or date because those 2 fields are automatically populated. The HTML form can be found in your downloads folder corresponding to this lesson. This will save you time from having to code it yourself. Just remember that if you're using the script provided, you must place it in your PHP lessons folder. With the form already created, we can start right away on the PHP script. Okay, so this is what the form page looks like. You can see that it's a very basic form. We have 3 input fields, and they're all nested inside a column. The labels are also nested inside a column. So we have 2 columns, 4 rows. On the right-hand side, we have all the input fields. On the left-hand side, we have the labels. The form action is set to register.php using the post method. And so most of this, again, should look familiar. Okay? So now we can start looking at the PHP script. You'll need to create this file and save the file as register.php. That's very important that you save that the file is that file name, because the action will call this file. And also make sure to save this file in the same folder as the form. So if you're using the same folder we've been using throughout all these exercises, then save it in the PHP lessons folder. Now you can start coding the script, and most of what you see here should look familiar. The first bit of code starts with storing the inputted data into corresponding variables using post. So the first input value had the name fname, the second has lname, and the third is email. Okay, so those inputted values are stored in these variables. Fname, lname, and email will contain the information that the user has inputted. Next, we have a function that validates the fields for empty spaces and backlashes. So remember, these are the 3 validation methods we explored in a previous lesson. And we've attached this function to each variable. So each variable has some basic validation. Next, we establish our connection to the My Website database. Okay, and that's just using the connection syntax. After the connection is established, we have our SQL insert statement. The format of the insert statement starts with specifying the table and the columns that the data will be inputted into. So in this case, we want to place the data into the first name, last name, and email fields. Okay, and that's in the users table. The corresponding values will come from the variables that we defined earlier. So fname, lname, and email. So the fname variable, the data in that variable will be stored in the first name column. The lname data will be stored in the last name column, and email in email. We then have an if statement that checks to see if the SQL query was successfully executed. If it was, the page will output the text, new record created successfully. If not, a default error message will be displayed. And lastly, we close the connection to the database using the close function. It's important to close an open database connection to reduce the strain on the MySQL database server from too many open connections. And this is really only an issue if your website gets a lot of traffic. If you're only having one or two, a few visitors here and there, then it's not going to be a big deal. With our register.php page complete, let's go ahead and test the functionality of our form in our web browser. So load the URL to your form page in your web browser. And I'm going to pull up phpMyAdmin. I've loaded the users table so we can see all the records. You're going to notice that as soon as we fill out this form and press submit, a new record is going to be added in our table. So I'll just put in a name. And so I'll click submit. Okay. Now you'll notice on the right side we have our success message. Now refresh your table and you'll see that our record was added to the database right at the end. The ID was automatically created and the date was also automatically recorded.